Okay, good afternoon, uh, good afternoon, everyone. I will share. Hold on, let me switch this around.
Are you doing the Zoom shuffle? Get this all the windows are at the wrong place to block what you really need to see.
And that's what's happening. Let me see. Okay. It's still not allowing me to share, but I'll go ahead and get, for the sake of time and to honest people time, to keep us on track. And if Megan is allowed to share, that's fine. That's fine as well. But again, thank you, Gary and colleagues, for inviting us to share. I'm Christopher Jett, and I'm just sort of introducing our AMTE Advocacy Committee. Um, and so, a little bit about the committee. So, the committee, of course, we advocate for different causes, concerns, issues, so on and so forth within the realm of mathematics teacher education. We represent a diverse group of individuals with respect to our research interests, our experiential backgrounds, and so that allows us to bring new insights to the mathematics teacher education landscape. So the members of the committee here, you see Patrice Waller from NSF. Well, she's not representing NSF here, so uh, Kyle. Uh-oh. Yeah, okay. And I would say you could come off and mute whatever this sort of thing. There's Nina Bailey. Um, there's Alexa, who's our graduate student representative, and we have Kim, who's here, as well as Betsy, who's there and spotlighted there. Okay, so yeah, that's a little bit. That's a little bit about who we are. Um, so what's going to happen with respect to the webinar? So I'll sort of provide a general overview. Um, Nina will share some things, Patrice and Kyle, and so these will also be the four sort of these will be the four options as it relates to the breakout groups. So I'm going to share a little bit about novices, and I'm going to speak for a few minutes um, and sort of introduce what we'll talk about in their particular session. So when we talk about novices and effective strategies for novices, of course, the first thing you want to do is to identify a particular issue as it relates to policy changes around mathematics teacher education. Um, and of course, you want to connect with folks within your state, within your region, as well as the AMTE conference writ large. And of course, the next AMTE conference is in uh, yeah, you can go back. You can go back to the first slide. I'm sorry. I mean, to the previous slide, and go back one more. Okay, yes, this here. Okay, so yeah, that's the AMT advocacy. Sorry, y'all, for the technical difficulties, but yes, that's the contact information for the committee members, and you can also find us on the AMTE website as well. And so that's a little bit about who we are. So the next slide, please. Yeah, so we were talking about getting started, and so just thinking about some effective strategies for um, getting started. One of the things I was thinking about with this whole idea of the problem collective, which is I borrowed that idea from the Where Research Begins book, And so the problem collective, that idea pretty much means that there may not be people who are in your same field, but you might share some similar problems or issues as it relates to your field. So, for example, we may look to our colleagues in like physics education, because even though physics education is not mathematics education, a lot of the policies and issues that impact them, for example, like the out of field teachers, large percentage of physics teachers, that's another thing that we can borrow from and learn from in mathematics education. Um, Another thing, with knowing where to start, of course, you want to probe your colleagues and other leaders in the field. Um, and then you can always start with a reading group. I know sometimes people think that's sort of graduate schoolish, but those sorts of things still work as it relates to dissecting policy issues and really understanding the big ideas behind some of these policy decision making processes. And another thing, is to really take advantage of the resources on your campuses. Some of these institutions have policy institutes, policy think tanks. There are even researchers who do policy related work. And so that's another sort of starting place. And a couple of issues as it relates to getting started and some of the challenges associated with that. That includes, of course, getting folks involved. And in this case, aware of the implications of mathematics teacher education. I think people know that there is a teacher shortage, but in some of the larger national conversations about STEM education, so on and so forth, mathematics can really serve as a crucial sort of quote unquote pipeline to that particular area. So that's one particular challenge is, sort of getting the people quote unquote on board with the challenges and also getting folks together. Next slide, please. I'll pass it over to my colleague.
If I can find the unmute button. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about staying informed, and staying informed can seem overwhelming because, as we all know, there's a large amount of issues and things to advocate for in our field. So I'll give you just some of the quick tips. So in terms of finding the people to follow, easiest way is social media, and I would say follow everyone from the large scale kind of senators, Congress folks, all the way down to everyone on your individual school board. Just by kind of following these folks, we get a good idea of where education is and what these folks deem as important enough to share, and that's usually a good starting point. I also follow a few folks that I know do a great job advocating on particular issues that are important to me, and that usually keeps me kind of at least up to date. Finding the issues, it again is overwhelming. There's many, so I would say pick the issues that are near and dear to your heart, and if we all do that, we're all chipping away at making progress. Finding the mathematics teacher educator policies can be tricky. I usually start by kind of reading school board minutes just to get an idea of what those big issues are. Occasionally attending a school board meeting. That's a good starting place to realize what's being discussed in your local community. And all of these things start to kind of build your awareness. And once you have that general picture of who you're following and what issues are important to you, you start to kind of figure out how you can make a difference. I think the hardest part about becoming an advocate is knowing where to start and how to get involved. And step one with anything, as we all know, is just to educate yourself, read, get up to date. That's step one. So I will pass it along.
Hi, everyone. A couple things I want to go back and reiterate. We didn't get to see the first slide that we created, but we actually somewhat altered the title from Insights with the from the AMTE committee to Conversations with the AMTE Advocacy Committee. I think it's so important to acknowledge that we do not come to this space as experts, but just as willing parties to do this work collaboratively. And I really hope that you all walk away with something, but definitely understanding that we all just came to have a really rich conversation. With that in mind, I also want to reiterate the fact that I am not here on behalf of NSF. I'm here on behalf of Patrice, and I could represent Cal State Fullerton, but it's really not NSF. The other thing, so in the breakout room that I'll be leading, we'll be talking about effective communication. And so this could be in conjunction with many people, depending on what the issue is that you're trying to combat. And so during this conversation, I hope that we are able to talk about what I think of as the 4 W's in terms of effective communication. So who is the right audience, right? Who needs to hear this message? And in order to determine who needs to hear this message, you got to think about, are you seeking to impact policy? Do you want to just bring awareness? Are you in need of funding for research about this topic? Or are you just looking to take a stand against a particular issue? An example of that is kind of the issue that AMTE is having with hosting the conference in Florida and where we want to stand in that space. Another thing to think about in terms of the who is what forms of communication, whether it be publications, media, social media, can be used to help push that message. When I think about the message, that brings about the what, right? So what is the right messaging? What is the intended goal of the advocacy or the issue that you're advocating for? What are the desired outcomes? Have you created a message that is clear and concise? Are you using facts and data and research and data? And of course, narratives as well, to show that the importance and the impact of this issue. And then when is also very important in terms of effective communication. When is the right time to bring forth this issue? Is it something that's urgent and pressing now? Does it require an immediate phone call or an immediate email to a legislature or policy holder? Or is it something that you can kind of take some time and plan out a way to bring about a community and to collaborate with others to bring awareness, whether it be through emails or publications or whatever the format you chosen to communicate the idea or the issue. And so all of these are very important. And then of course the why. Why is it important? Why is this issue important to any of the people that you plan to communicate with, whether it be district partners or policymakers or funding agencies? Why is this issue important in the local community, in the state, in the nation? And making sure that information is clear. The other thing that I'm sure that all of us will come to talk about in our small groups is the importance of building community, whether it be, I think Nina talked about who to follow, right? Who are the people, who are the forerunners, if you will, of these issues. And so how do we build community to help to push our issues and ideas forward? So we will be talking more about that in the effective communication small group. And I will now turn it over to our next committee member, Kyle.
Thank you so much, Patrice. Along with building that community is exactly how do we make those connections and build those professional relationships. It can feel really intimidating to someone who's never sort of initiated a project or a advocacy policy type situation to find those power players, but it is an important part of the journey, and it's an important part of sort of being efficient with what you end up producing. So most of the time you can find that information fairly quickly on the internet. As Nina said, make sure that you're following folks on social media, and the more powerful folks will rise to the top of social media platforms in terms of how many hits they get, how many likes they get, those kinds of things. It's also important that if you're going to start down the path of trying to get a policy change or trying to implement something specific to your needs, that you have a pitch ready. It can't be the case that you show up to a meeting, an organization's meeting, and say, you know, I want to do something about all the book challenges, and you don't have anything more specific than that, right? That's way too broad and way too big. And we'll get more into these details in our breakout session, but you need to have a specific thing that you're going to be focused on. And it does need to be near and dear to your heart. You can take that to places where your passion will overlap with other folks' passions, because you can sort of get dual or even triple, actually, outcomes out of those networking relationships with these professional players. And it is, you know, one of those things where when you have something in common, it's easier to work together than if you both feel like you're trying to pull towards your own policy change or whatever you're advocating for. There are, of course, challenges to this. If you've never done it before, it can be really hard to approach someone who's considered a power player and try to gain their attention with your own issue. But it's important to do that. And if you don't start that process, then you might just end up stirring a lot of your own anger and your own sort of perceived failures. So yeah, and I think I'm passing it. Wait, I have a cursor to move off to back to Chris. Am I passing it back to Chris?
Yes, and so yeah, as we think about these, and thank you all for sharing those big ideas. So as we think about those big ideas, the objective of this particular webinar is to have some focused conversations on, like I said, the first one was about getting started. The second one was about staying informed, of course, the effective communication, and the importance of these professional relationships. And so breakout one will be, talk about, like I said, just talk about how to get started with advocating in mathematics teacher education. The second one, you'll be guided by the question about how can you stay informed about issues in mathematics teacher education. The third breakout group was how to effectively communicate with partners, legislators, and other policymakers. And then the last one deals with establishing these professional relationships between these key players. And so we're going to stay in these groups until about a quarter till, and then at that time we'll come back and share out and learn as a collective community. And so we will await now for the breakout rooms from the organizer. There'll be a choice here.
I don't know about other groups, but does it seem that when we get cut off, it's always at the most critical part of your conversation?
Always.
Yeah, Chris was about to drop some knowledge on us, and there it went.
All right. So keeping us on time and with that sort of thing. So group one, we'll let Alexia share out. Excuse me, Alexa share out for our group. Yeah, you're muted. Maybe is it the same issues? Are you muted or? No, I think it was happening earlier. I think the host has to unmute.
She should be unmuted now.
It looks like they're unmuted, but
yes, they are showing up as unmuted, but I can't hear.
Are you
what
saying
you were
anything?
saying.
Alexa, can you try? It doesn't seem like she's hearing anything, maybe.
I think they can hear us, but they.
Yeah, it looks like she's not hearing at all.
I'm responding to them in the chat.
Chris, do we want to move on to group 2 and circle back around?
Yeah. I would say we'll move on to group 2 and circle back, and then if it still doesn't work, I'll just report on behalf of group 1.
Sorry,
But
can I try now? I can hear you now. Can you hear me
yes,
now? I am so sorry for that. I don't know why my headphones decided to die. In group 1, we talked about things related to getting started, including questions of both how we, especially as math ed and math teacher ed people, can feel like policy and understanding policy is a weakness. And if we're trying to then address that with students, that can be really challenging if it's not something that we ourselves feel strong about, that there are a lot of complications because of all of the layers at which policy is happening and the ways that those layers influence each other. And it can be hard to figure out where to start. And that sometimes it feels like those layers can get used as an excuse of like universities saying, oh, well, I have to do this because the state said, or so on, and trying to figure out ways to understand where there is flexibility and how to best use flexibility or encourage institutions to use flexibility when they can. And we talked some about especially testing for teacher candidates and the ways that different test policies can make things harder for the students that we're working with and limit who ends up going into the field.
Are we moving to group 2? All right, so we talked about all sorts of things, and I'm pretty sure we got off topic more than we were on topic, but isn't that how conversations go? So we started by just kind of digging into what are some of the issues we're all facing right now, and how to think about how to get connected into those issues in our university and some of the key people on the university campus that we can learn from. But where we sort of paused, which I find an interesting place, was thinking about when there is an issue, there's multiple people involved in that issue, and really digging into the rationale of why that issue is important to each one of those people, because I think the hardest part about doing any kind of advocacy work is aligning all of the different goals, or aligning all of the different reasons for wanting to address that issue. So if we think about, we talked a lot about program vitality in our group, where the president stands, or where the deans stand, where department heads stand, where we as mathematics educators stand on what program vitality actually means, is very different for each one of us. How we define it is different. And, our goals and outcomes are going to be different. Some of us will be focused on the financial aspects. For us as mathematics educators, we're more focused on, we need the program because we need more teachers, we need better teachers, we need them to be prepared. And that's not going to align with everyone else. So really kind of digging into, if I want to make a change, I first have to understand why this issue is or is not important to the person that I'm trying to convince, and kind of take it from that psychological perspective, if you will. To the folks in group 2, did I miss anything big that we talked about? I think we hit on a lot of those ideas, hopefully.
okay, good. Yeah, it's group 3.
Hi. I thought you were going to go back to group 1, Chris, so we're still thinking. We may have, as Nina talked about a variety of things, including the things in group 4, which is about relationships. Allison from Middle Tennessee talked about a problem that she was concerned about in terms of low enrollment and getting communication going with the powers that be within the school, the university, the school districts, as well as a statewide communication. And we talked a lot about the importance of relationships and making connections with people at all levels. And Mary was particularly helpful in talking about the importance of the state consultants for mathematics education and how important they can be. While they're not policymakers, they are often in the world of the people who are making policy and can help with those connections. Would anybody else in our group like to add something?
I would just like to add, being that person that is in that state education, but not in the policy part, we're probably as equally frustrated as you all are.
Yeah.
So if anything, you can have a partner to vent to.
Good, thank you. And then, of course, group 4.
Group 4 talked about professional relationships, and our opening gambit was really about starting small, that you build a relationship. Perhaps you present some data in a group and find that you have an advocate, somebody who wants to work with you to advocate for a particular position. And that first step being the most challenging, the one that you take the biggest risk at before perhaps you acquire that reputation as somebody who's going to keep asking these questions, but finding advocates in those places. The other thing is we had some mention of time commitments, which sort of broadened out to talk about emotional commitments to ideas and causes, that you use these professional relationships to balance and to keep your own life level so that you have a way of moderating your own emotions around something that's important to you, is to use those professional relationships to do that. We also started looking at some practicalities through some practical conditions and issues that people had brought in. And a couple good ideas that came out of that was, first of all, look to partner institutions that perhaps have the same issue. So maybe another university who's working on the same issue, you might find a partner in that group and you can work together for a solution that has a broader base, if you will. Another idea that came out of that was doing a pilot of an idea just to see how it works. So rather than investing wholesale, bring it in at a lower risk level for the people involved in policy and see what happens and make your case with that. And finally, we had some ideas around building advocacy type committees and changing up the leadership structures, and talking about perhaps that 2 people would be co-leaders and that there would be a cycle so that there is fresh ideas constantly coming in. So 2 people in, 2 people out, and you keep that going over time so that there's more opportunities for people to join. Any questions for group 4, or somebody want to add to it from the group?
Yeah. No. Thank you all for sharing. And just 30 seconds left on my end, just to say, as you can see, the importance of this policy related work. I mean, it's a complex issue. I think we all see how much more work we have to do. And, I've also been thinking about this with respect to my own coursework. I'm teaching both undergraduates and graduate students, and just having them to be more sort of informed about policy issues and how they impact mathematics education, really with the understanding that they are the next generation of leaders who'll be taking these different charges with respect to this work. So yeah, I know the work can be challenging and hard, but it is rewarding. So Yes, thank you for inviting, and I'll turn it back over to Gary for the closing remarks and announcement.
Barbara, did you want to say something?
I did, Gary, thanks. I just wanted to add to Chris's comment there that one of the things that we have in teacher education generally and discipline-specific preparation programs is that as we get required to do more details around content and various other things, that the policy pieces get dropped. And I don't know whether that's intentional to keep the feminized professions suppressed and the policy voices suppressed of those people of being an educator, or whether that's just because somebody values the technocratic parts of teaching over the policy and leadership components. Just an observation that I've made for the last long time.
Hey, thank you for that. I think you have a point there. And Brian, do you want to wrap us up here?
Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. Gary's going to mute me if my internet goes haywire. I'm calling from rural Georgia today, but I have a few very quick and exciting announcements. Number one, we'd love to invite everyone to come to our monthly NIC-Cast in November, which I think is going to again be another very important topic: strategies for meaningful participation with our K-12 partners in program transformation. And what we'll have is a panel of several sites who are having some successes with that partnership. Second, as a reminder, we are hosting an evening MTEP event at AMTE, and it will begin, or very quickly early on, involve a brief Ignite style session where several of our colleagues will, in 5 minutes or less with running slides, talk to us about something exciting at their site. There's links here. I think they're being thrown into the chat about signing up for the conference. Several of you are team leaders or site leaders, and we really strongly encourage you to invite your colleagues to everything that I announced here, including the conference and the NIC-Cast. Next, I can't tell you how excited I am about our monthly newsletter that is being put out by Megan Liederbrand as one of the key people getting it together and pushed out. Megan's here on our call. But the newsletter is fantastic. It's just a nice little snapshot of the work that's happening with MTEP. I find it inspirational, useful, helps me connect to people who might be doing work similar to mine. And within the newsletter, there's an announcement of the upcoming events, so you can always keep track of things that are going on. Finally, if you're not connected yet, we stay in contact with one another on our Canvas site. So this next slide that's about to show up is the link. Oops, you skipped it. Are the links to join that communication group. And finally, in case at the newsletter is the larger website, the public-facing website for MTEP. So all these links, hopefully you'll find in the chat, and you can share with the appropriate people, including like your department chairs and deans, to remind them that you're part of this active community and preparing teachers, responding to policy, advocating for healthy policies, etc. Gary, I think I covered everything I had in mind. Were there any additional announcements?
Just one. Thanks again to the AMT Advocacy Committee for being willing to take this on and helping to spur our conversations. I found it very rewarding, and hopefully we'll continue the conversation about this important issue. And thanks to everyone for being here, and we're done on time. See you later.
Thanks for having us.